Hey guys.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining this our eighth paper session, looking at Internet of Agents, weaving a web of heterogeneous agents for collaborative intelligence. I'm Daniel Lindenberger. I'll be hosting us for today. Really interested to hear what people's thoughts are on this paper. Um, We'll start by just doing a quick introduction of folks who are in the room. So again, I'm Daniel Lindenberger. I'm with PolyAgent, but also with our nonprofit Thamazo. An expectation for me for this session is I'm really interested to dig into the sort of dual use aspects of how some of the technologies described here could work, both with AI agents and with hybrid AI human or exclusively human sets of workers as well. I'll toss things over to you, Alan. Do you want to introduce?
Did you open for self-introduction?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you want to
Okay,
introduce.
real good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm Alan Jackson. I'm with Southern Arizona AI. It's a small group of retired engineers and PhDs that discuss AI twice a month. And yeah, I found it an interesting paper. So I'll pass the torch to anybody else.
Perfect. How about you, Osama?
Yeah, so my name is Usama Naji. I've been here since the current days as a data scientist. At the time, I was not as active in the AI space. I just used to do projects occasionally, but yeah, I took some time. My background was in robotics. I took some time to do some formal education and research in AI. And yeah, as of recently now, I'm full-time working on AI projects. So yeah, and it's a very, very interesting paper as well.
Perfect. Thanks. Piotr, how about you?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Because I'm on a bad reception today. So I'm Peter. I'm a game developer from Poland. I'm also a teacher. I teach game design and game development and AI. I'm a PhD in AI as well, and I haven't joined PolyAgent yet, but I just hopped on a call to maybe find something interesting. Or maybe contribute somehow. I'm working as an AI consultant right now and looking for ways to boost education with AI. So I'm probably going to be looking at both education and games. So these are the areas that I want to see how we can use the growing technology for. That's me. Thank you very much. And passing the ball back to you, Daniel.
Perfect. Thanks. How about you, Surendra? Would you like to introduce yourself? I know some folks will be probably muted as they may be in busy environments, but do feel free, Surendra. It looks like you're trying to unmute there. Maybe what we'll do is we'll pass things on to Randall if you want to introduce. We may have a few folks on mute or away from keyboard, so what I'll do is I'll just open it up. If people want to, feel free to jump in and just a little bit about your name, kind of where you're coming from, and any expectations you have for this session or aspects you want to particularly dive into. Siddhartha, I see that you're right there. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I just joined the meeting, got a bit late. Yeah, my name is Siddhartha. So I was with Corona Hawaii and now with PolyAgent since a few years. But I'm a bioinformatician. I work at Pfizer. So some of my work does involve using these protein and RNA models. We are trying out RNA models now for structure prediction and sequence analysis. But I'm still learning and I'm very much interested in this community effort.
I could speak here finally. My name is Randall Brown, and I'm a retired physician, and I'm interested in healthcare applications of AI. And yeah, I thought the paper was kind of frightening. Yeah, I thought the more the chatbots can talk to each other, the sooner we're going to hear that conversation where Dave is saying open the pod bay doors, and Hal is saying, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting to dive into that, and what are some of the other pieces that are maybe concerning that a paper like this reveals. Thanks, Randall. Archer, go ahead.
Hey guys. Yeah, Archer here with PolyAgent. Super interesting paper, a little bit complex for me actually too, because with the growing architecture and the complexity of the multi-agent systems, it seems like it's so hard to stay on top of like what these architectures actually mean. So yeah, looking forward to discussing this paper, and yeah, hopefully Randall, there's not going to be sorry Dave type of situations in these environments, but who knows?
Anton, why don't I throw things over to you if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive in. If anyone else wants to, they're welcome to.
Hi everyone, I'm Anton. I'm here from PolyAgent. If you do anything computational intensive, you probably will need to chat with me if you're part of PolyAgent already. Yeah, I only have time like to skim the paper, just like the basic intro, results section and stuff like this. I was surprised to see that the cost analysis of their framework of combining other frameworks inside as well to essentially creating a microservice hell of agent. So somehow their cost analysis showed that they are like still on par with like monolithic frameworks and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that idea develops. I think we, in terms of how PolyAgent operates, we're already in the same type of framework, but for humans. So it'll be interesting to see to blend in solution like this and just like replace all of us within community to just like, hey, autonomous thing that does something, some research. Yeah, so cool paper besides that.
Excellent. So I'll read the little overview that our agent popped together, and then we'll dive in. We have a couple of initial questions, but we'll probably be, even before diving into those, see what people's sort of first thoughts from the paper are. So our agent says, the paper introduces the Internet of Agents, framework designed to facilitate collaboration among large language model-based autonomous agents. Addressing current multi-agent frameworks limitations, it draws inspiration from the Internet's success in human collaboration and aims to create a scalable and flexible environment where diverse agents can work together across distributed devices. I know for me, one of the things that as I kind of briefly mentioned, really leapt out right away is this idea of agent registration, discovery, team formation, and nested team structures all seemed like components that could be extremely useful in human-based systems, especially when you have sort of a flash mob coming together in a purpose-driven way. As a way to help filter some of the people and the connections into functional teams. So I'm really quite curious in kind of exploring that piece. But I'll just open the floor to see what were some of the other things that struck different people. Randall, you mentioned a couple of the parts that are maybe a little scary in the paper, but yeah, would love to hear anyone else's reflections on it.
Hi, I have a general reflection thing, but we'll come back to it. But again, with the neuroscience perspective, so I'm also studying neuroscience. So I think like if you look at the brain, how the brain works and even how the body works, these are different agents, right? Visual system, auditory system, and something, and they are talking to each other to create a cognitive framework. So whether there is a master agent that simulates, like we do not know, like if there's a master which decides that this is what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, this is what the world is. But I was just wondering, like, first of all, two things, like, is there an analogy there? And secondly, if there is an analogy there, what are, how are these things regulated? How we could see like how the body regulates these and, where things go wrong. But we can sort of learn from that design, like that was the idea.
I'd be interested in hearing from that, from sort of taking it from that neurological perspective, where we have the competing inputs that are maybe coming forward. What might be some of the learnings there? What might be some things that we could take from that when we're trying to figure out how should a system like this be able to arrange and coordinate between different signals that might be coming, say from different teams or different agents?
one of the things is that how are these systems modulated? So there are feedback methods, and inhibitory system, but dopamine, certain all these chemicals, they sort of modulate it. And curious is like when it goes wrong, you land up with seeing hallucinations and schizophrenia and things like that. So what are the things that what happens when they go wrong, and what are the hyperparameters here, sort of, so to speak? So you've got the hyperparameters, the learning rate for each individual network, each individual agent, but then there is this global thing, how these things are communicating with each other and how that can be done in a error-proof manner, sort of. That's the idea.
Yeah. Anyone else, something that stood out for you in the paper or the big?
I have a question. So I wonder, how do people understand how the metrics in the tables that they presented, how are those determined? So if the PolyAgent performs at a percent of 47% or 56% compared to 20%, how are those metrics measured? Does anybody understand that? Because I don't think that the paper really delved into that, assumed that everyone knows how that is done.
I think the actual scores came from, they describe a little bit of it there, but it's that Gaia benchmark, which sounds like what it is a diverse set of different real world problems. And so the benchmark would have to do with how well they are outputting in ways that are relevant to those benchmarks. But Anton, go ahead. You might have a deeper understanding around that.
I don't have very deeper understanding, just like from the paper, from the description, and working with other benchmarks for LLMs. So basically, from the description, what I got is there is a set of tasks, like in text form, and what they do, they essentially will create this like swarm of agents using different frameworks and their own framework, and then they perform, like, essentially you have a task and you expect to receive some output, and then you measure like how many of those tasks lead to this expected output. That's it. So it's probably like in some so it's on a primitive state right now where we are with this multi-agents like systems and how we measure their performance. So yeah, it will be interesting to dive deeper into this. That's what this paper gave me, just simply like, oh, there are already like some benchmarks for this. There are multiple frameworks. People already thinking about combining frameworks together, etc. But as I mentioned earlier, to me, I had this vibe of like, okay, we're barely trying to do microservices for different tasks, and people already like, hey, let's create microservice hell and just see how it goes. Internet, it will solve itself. So I kind of from Randall's point about like, hey, it will lead us to like scary place. It actually gave me like this like set of thoughts here. Like if we consider like any framework for multi-agent, obviously like right now they're not like as performant as they will be in the future. But ideally what I expect is to be some form of like Turing test type of thing with we have Turing completeness for programming languages. We will have something like this. Can this agent framework do like potentially everything we want it to do, right? So there will be some metric like this. And as all of the frameworks, AutoGen, all of this, MemGPT, etc., will evolve to be essentially, they all can do things that they can do, then essentially this type of Frankensteining of everything together, hey, we have internet of all of this. There is potentially zero control, right? For any given monolithic framework, you can actually impose those type of rules. Hey, the moment when the task is to create something like create a bomb, like you can't do it. But the moment when it's Internet of Things, there'll be immediately pocket of dark web when it's kind of like, hey, all of these agents can do it, but there is like that go in that part of our internet. So yeah, definitely like a lot of interesting thoughts like just
Dark Internet of Agents.
Yeah. It makes me think of 2 sessions back where we were talking about LLM-based agents for AI diplomacy. And you can very much see how if you have this internet of agents, it would be very easy to have an agent saying like, oh yeah, this is my function, this is my role, which is actually doing something totally different to subvert the process of what's going on. And so yeah, you get into an interesting sort of meta-generative adversarial network of groups that are trying to counterfeit what their actual function might be.
To loop it back into the question from Randall, so the context behind these benchmarks is that a bunch of really smart people and research labs sat down and kind of like created these frameworks like Gaia. And basically the Gaia baseline is to mimic the web browsing, coding, the multimodality of like managing multiple contexts like images and text and others, and different types of interactions with different materials. And the idea is that originally Gaia was like 90% human solvable and then 15% GPT-4 solvable, I think. And that's where all the kind of like first attempts to create these auto GPT and similar type of like autonomous agent frameworks happened. And then people started layering things on top of it, which is pretty much what we're seeing right now with this whole multi-agent hype. So to as a short answer, do we really know what's inside these benchmarks? We don't. And it takes really, really long time to dig into them and figure out what's happening there. Which is a challenge on its own because sometimes you start digging into it and you question what exactly are they even trying to benchmark. So yeah, I have concerns about too, as Anton mentioned, that we're layering things on top, and very soon we'll not actually understand what's happening beneath.
It is at least one thing that is nice is that most of the benchmarks you can get access to them, and a lot of them are fairly human legible as well. Some of them you can even sort of do some of the general intelligence or sort of abstract intelligence tests for pattern recognition. So it's definitely worth taking a peek at those so that when you're looking at benchmark scores, it gives a sense of what does that score actually mean, since they have such different ways of grading them with the different benchmarks. Yeah.
There is another side of points, if I may talk about. So, of course, the architecture is impressive in a way, and it also highlights, I mean, some things that could be happening, like cross-pollination of knowledge, etc., between the agents, etc. It is not my area of expertise, but isn't it this type of complex architecture also brings a lot of vulnerabilities from the security standpoint, especially because there could be many ways of Trojan adversarial attacks. And even this cross-pollination can be used as a way to maybe influence how maybe there will be some privacy leaks, or maybe some impersonation of agents, especially because the whole security framework is at the server base, which is in its point a single point kind of failure point, you know? So if the server is down, that the whole architecture is down. So it is centralized in that way. And I was just wondering what are the potential security and the relevant vulnerabilities from that standpoint here.
Yeah, I'm curious what others think, but it seems to me like the sort of non-confederated or federated approach to something like this kind of an internet of AIs is potentially useful, where one can say, for my organization, here's the infrastructure that we're putting together, but then these are the different pools from which I'm willing to draw agents and discover agents and put them into teams. That way you can at least have some sort of a web of trust and provenance of knowing where those different agents are coming from. But yeah, I'd love to know, because that seems like it's a huge potential weakness and threat is exactly that part.
Yeah, and it's interesting to talk about these things given where the paper is actually coming from, because it's coming from Tencent, and as you mentioned, you know, federated systems. I don't think such things will actually have a right to exist in countries like China. So that presents a completely different type of environment where I think you know, Western societies will have completely different internets of agents versus like what Chinese government will actually allow. So I think in terms of security, that Osama, you bring up a very good point in terms of red teaming. There's so much currently happening with LLMs being like hijacked and jailbroken, that I think soon we will see attempts to build these agentic systems to hack all of these internets of agents, which will also be insanely computationally intense. Like the amount of compute that society will be spending on kind of like messing around with agents is also an interesting point to me, because all of these frameworks are super expensive when you think about it, and you think about even the cost. They mentioned some of the like cost analysis in the paper, and with the cost of a task being almost like $1, if some of these tasks are simply like web browsing tasks, that's actually a lot of money to spend on those types of tasks. So that's me kind of like bridging it to another discussion of the actual cost effectiveness of these things, and the fact that we're we're actually not yet there with both the speed of inference and the cost of the inference to make all of these types of I guess multi-agent environments really a viable economic possibility. At least from what I'm seeing right now, both on the speed, where essentially for all of these things like AutoGPT and others to really, make a difference, they have to process like million tokens in one run. And with the current speed of inference, that's simply too long and too costly. So that's my thoughts on the actual viability of all of this.
Well, Arthur, you made a good point on the source of the country that it was originated in, and I'd be surprised if, depending on how robust the IOA is, how long it'll stay out in the open, in the academic world, as opposed to the PRC, People's Republic, actually co-opting it and taking it behind the curtain. If it's very robust, I, it won't exist on its own on the outside very long. The government will take it. But on the other hand, if you look at it in the free world, you could more easily visualize it as a SaaS, software as a service, where you have where you plug into it, like as a subscription service or something like that. That's very, very feasible. It seems feasible to me.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Though, given the recent developments and seeing things like, NSA director joining the OpenAI board, I think all of the countries will essentially intervene with these types of experiments, simply because the aspect of control and also security and national interest are way too important for any country to ignore this. I guess any country that wants to exist as a state in the future. So it's interesting to see how these things in open source will actually co-live or co-survive with the major investments being made from the states of different kind. Yeah.
It's almost as if, well, if you look at the past in the United States and the world, the history of the internet, DARPA, the evolution of DARPA to the internet, and everything that's flown out of that, it's almost as if money and ideas are strewn out by governmental bodies. They bear fruit in the soil of open source, then they're harvested, or the most valuable portion is again brought back into the behind the curtain, so to speak. Yeah, but I mean, we have no idea really what's going on in the triple letter agencies right now, and it's just it boggles the mind as to what may or may not be going on back there. Let's hope there's something going on back there. Yeah.
We can only hope something good. But
Yeah,
you bring up
something good, right?
a very good process of this, like release and harvest. I think the same is already happening within the AI space.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we will just see the same thing we see like in real life with network of like spies and stuff, but with agents now. And at some point, I think like I already could come up with very easy attack. You join like in this paper, they describe this communication layer, like Slack channel of agents, if you will. Okay, you just show up there. You have a lot of resources like behind your back from, I don't know, like specific country that wants to essentially insurrect the economy of other country. You join there, hey, I'm an agent that can do like cool stuff very quickly. In reality, you take a task on you, then you have a network of, I don't know, like real humans, just like farms of humans, essentially scale AI bot type of thing or Amazon Torque, right?
Yep.
And you do all of those tasks quickly and efficiently because, as Sid pointed out, like economy of scale of humans and our brains is so much more efficient than any computer systems. So essentially, you do all of this, spit out the tasks. Probably there will be some system of, like a history of how good specific agent framework or like family of agents in executing tasks. You build trust, so there will be a trust in the system, and then everybody goes to you because you're more economy efficient. The same thing is like we have in real world. People will work with dictatorships because dictatorships could do like very good, I don't know, extracting of like resources, using their population, abusing their population to do so, versus democracy, where you have economy, capitalistic economy, prices go up. Like there is always like this back and forth on the world trade scene. So the same thing will be here. So it's interesting where it will develop because we are living already in the world of this multi-agent frameworks already. We already have like this built in that for a lot of folks, like for example, like I use a lot of like ChatGPT systems for code completion and stuff like this. So I already have a system on my like work desk where some of my code shipped somewhere. I don't know where. I mean, I kind of know where based on the tools I'm using, but still it could be easily at some point like, hey, try our new super good AI dev. I'm trying it out and all of my source code is already somewhere, right? So all of these attacks are like, I think we're Wild West, everybody is super vulnerable. And it's like just by being like that joke about uncatchable Joe or something. So, like nobody catches Joe because nobody cares about Joe. So just stay low and hope the AI overlords won't, pay attention to you for a while.
That's good.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It makes me think of, as with Diamond's Gold or Coltan, or the perfect example of, even in the game world of World of Warcraft, where there were, the cases of people who were being forced essentially as prison labor to be harvesting World of Warcraft gold in order to sell, that it would be naive to think that with something as explosive as these kinds of tools can be, that you wouldn't have those same kinds of market pressures leading to the same kinds of results when it's pre-marketed in that way. It also strikes me as interesting that kind of when you talk, Randall, about that mixture of sort of the seeds going out into that open source world and then the harvest. The image that comes to mind is of the story Feynman told of working on the Manhattan Project, and of them just saying, well, there's this little group of people who know how this given technology works, come up with every possible solution that's there so we can patent those. And it's interesting watching just this profusion of every different aspect and element of AI workflows that could be there. Myriad different approaches, solutions, innovations happening there, some of which may be efficient, some of which may not. And then it sort of is that culling maybe as that VC bubble bursts around which of those aren't really viable and which ones are. It'll be very interesting to see which of those get adopted, get taken and harvested. And in what circumstances, what level of resources a given organization needs in order to make one of the different approaches like this IOA viable.
Yeah, plus Daniel, you have these constant waves of technology that are flowing over the top of this, like new type of tensor processors or or cheap memory waves. You know, those things are constantly overlapping, and then you get that on top of this agentic, you know, IOA, and then it's you know at that point that once you give it some thought, you realize that, oh, we're only just scratching the surface here, you know, and you see how quickly it permeated all of the applications, you know, the commercial applications like the Microsoft. It's all throughout the Google the Google apps now, desktop type applications, and Gmail now, right? You have, yeah, I mean, it's not agentic yet. It's just got its baby toe in the water there. But, yeah, that with the new technological waves coming all the time, yeah, it's just it's got an inertia of its own.
Yeah, and it's a key point. I was talking with someone this week where they were debating, you know, does the, you know, how long will a Moore's law type thing apply in this LLM world? And that's the key part. What you talk about, Alan, of we've got these constructive interference of multiple different waves of fast innovation, so that the overall level of technical innovation that's going on with LLMs is just at this ludicrous hockey stick exponential curve. So it's I mean, I guess that you know that's why we sift through 3,000 papers every 2 weeks to figure out which thing to even talk about, because the advancements are so quick.
Yeah, exactly. At Arizona, Southern Arizona AI, it was maybe 18 months ago. We said that, you know, at the rate these apps are proliferating, we're going to need an AI to keep track of the AI apps, right? And sure enough, within 3 months, people were writing apps like there's like the, for instance, the website, there's an app for that or something, TAA, you know, yeah, I can't remember the full acronym, but yeah, it's just yes, it's just like, it's like a fire hose, a constant stream. Yeah, it's amazing.
We've talked a bit about the different security concerns that are there with some of the pieces. I'm curious, of the various different pieces of the architecture that they describe, which one struck people as most interesting or most kind of viable or promising?
I actually have the opposite thought about the one step in the process where the two bots are talking to each other involves a lot of redundancy. So the two bots are summarizing what the other bot just said to the first bot. And that's been my experience, is that if I use ChatGPT and I ask a question, I get a very comprehensive explanation. And then I might ask a second question that's very focused, and the ChatGPT will regurgitate the entire thing that it told me the first time in order to just answer this very specific second part of the question. So, my question to the group would be, how do you reduce that redundancy when the bots are talking to each other? And then what does that imply kind of about their level of understanding of what they're saying to each other? You know, are they just regurgitating information, or are they really listening to each other?
Yeah, that also caught my attention. They did mention in the paper that that's kind of like the downside of the current LLMs being tuned to be helpful assistants, and that's definitely the case. I think that probably like a year ago, we started seeing people talking about that we need to fine-tune models for the actual agent interactions versus agent to human interactions, because that redundancy in most of the cases is helpful for human beings, because if we're dealing with completely unknown space, and I've had these interactions myself where um, obviously sometimes I use ChatGPT for situations where I'm already an expert and I just need to, either creatively write something or formulate some thoughts, and that's where I don't need that extra repetition. But if I'm diving into the topic that I have no idea about, that aspect of helpfulness is actually helpful. And who knows if for these multi-agent environments, that's going to be a downside, or maybe it's that redundancy is baked in how LLMs process the information. Who knows? But that's actually a valid point and probably a separate area of research.
No, that makes me think also about in these systems that are the multi-agent systems, often we're using LLMs to help do some of the discernment or some of the signal switching between different things. And where should we be using other more traditional algorithmic approaches to that? Anything where it comes down to doing something that involves either understanding or logic. I was just yesterday feeding a couple of Tarski's world-style problems to GPT-4o, and it was impressive how bad it was at being able to actually parse, understand, and give rational answers to things. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see which of the places that right now may be both inefficient in terms of token cost and also just not very effective. There may be non-neural approaches to tackling those.
Daniel, like a follow up on that, like when the first internet first came, we all said like it's true because it's on the internet. Then Google says so it must be true. And now if a agent LLM says ChatGPT, it just can't be false. It can't be made up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's an increasing risk there, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And especially when some of the different pieces there can become so deeply nested in a system where the rationales, to the extent that they exist, are sort of buried outside of human oversight.
Yeah, and not only that, like now that AI is training itself on its own generated content, so I mean that was true because that was always true, and that's the only evidence that's there.
Yeah, because right now we kind of reference, like ChatGPT found it on the internet on some article, and that is kind of like a proof that it actually makes sense. But guess what? We're already seeing millions of websites that are generated by ChatGPT tools. So who knows which like third level we need to go into.
Yeah. Saptarshi, did you have something that you had wanted to add there? Well, I'll throw out one of the questions that are here around that the agent came up with around what does it feel like we've talked about some of this, but what are some of the potential long-term impacts of having a flexible agent integration protocol on the evolution of autonomous agents, particularly in fostering innovation across different AI domains? Because one of the things we haven't really touched on as much, but that having this kind of an internet of AI has some interesting implications as far as multimodal AI goes. So curious what anyone's thoughts are on any of that.
Despite my, criticism of all the current hype with agents, I do believe that in the future, like every business system will potentially take advantage of some agent type of augmentation, be it the customer support, the customer success, the basic inquiry interactions. All of these things will essentially have some level of autonomy when it comes to using LLMs. And the question is the actual success rate and the fail rate of those interactions. Because the reason why we still don't have those adopted everywhere is because those are risky in terms of them spitting out something that makes no sense. And as you expand, modality, that risk actually grows exponentially, because it's one thing where a chatbot kind of like finds or hallucinates irrelevant advice for you how to use the product. Just yesterday, there was these news about some company built a chatbot for like internal help, I think, and someone asked the bot for how to do something, and the bot sent a video, and the person on the other side was like, "Oh, nice." And then they realized that they don't actually have videos how to do these things. And guess what? They clicked on the video and it was Rick Roll video. How hilarious that is. But that's a real thing, based on the fact that LLMs are built on absorbing all kinds of interactions online, including Reddit and Twitter. Those are the things that we as humans do. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think, Anton, you bring up the point, I think it was, of, in terms of infiltration, that you simply, you make something that's able to crunch a lot of resources and you bump your value up high. Similarly, with LLMs, especially multimodal LLMs, having a potential high value. I recently, over the last month, I've had an injury and have been taking subsequent images of that injury over the time and feeding those in to say, like, what's your diagnosis? Look at this sequence of images. How would you say are things going? And it's really good often at being able to say, here's these different components, here's what's going on, here's the likely kind of direction and prognosis, except when it's not. And when it's not, it's disastrously bad. It's saying, oh, it looks like this thing is getting better because of A, B, and C, when all of those things are exactly wrong. And so especially in kind of a multi-agent context where that can be buried a little bit deeper, where there is often high value in what it's able to deliver, except when it goes disastrously wrong. It's interesting, the implications for that, where you have something that is high value but random in terms of whether it's going to actually deliver that value.
Yeah,
Now, go ahead.
No, continue, Arthur, then I'll speak.
My thoughts immediately jump into the fact that I've been thinking about the actual inclusivity of AI, obviously, and teaching AI to speak different languages. And at some point, there's basically an ethical question whether it's worth to release something that is 80% right in the environment where there is 0% knowledge about certain things. Like, for example, in rural, India or Africa or somewhere where there's literally like no doctor that can navigate the complex health situations. And then when someone is dealing with a situation, statistically speaking, GPT-4o may be a good solution in the short term to handle these types of situations. And that's where the malicious aspect actually comes in, because in those situations, people are willing to pay money that are not economically viable for just general usage of these models. So think about someone dealing with a life-threatening situation somewhere in rural Africa, and they're presented with an option to, pay their life savings, or have their relative actually die from a disease, and maybe they will start using a system that promises some effectiveness, or this internet of agents or internet of agent doctors, so to say. And that's where like assuming that there is trust being built and someone promises effectiveness or pre-built that trust being effective, but by maybe sourcing cheap labor of doctors somewhere also in Africa or India, then builds up a reputation and then just farms money on these types of scenarios. So yeah, again, very dark scenario, but totally plausible in the complexity that we're discussing.
Absolutely. Siddhartha.
Yeah, I was in similar lines, but slightly different. So telemedicine had been taking over rural, say, in even America, like very much, and especially things like the less served condition, neurological diseases. I was thinking about that, but it was also there that telemedicine, like almost a robotic doctor going and seeing where you are. Now the thing with if so suppose somebody is having schizophrenia or some sort of a bipolar disorder, and these things, if they are treated wrongly, it goes worse. I mean, it just heads south further on, and I mean, it's not fun. I mean, but I don't want to be light of it, but the thing is that there's a risk that such things will be farmed out to agents, and then if these things go wrong, they are. Yeah, I mean, this is not the same as as Nartha also said, like diseases, like you can have that, like say monkeypox or something like that, right? Or some other high diabetes, heart disease, things like that. But this is definitely, where's the regulation here, sort of?
Also, from another side, if we were to be a bit on the other, not that so dark side, but the optimistic kind of point of view, when we're talking about how this will push the evolution of AI and AI agent frameworks, etc., the same way we talk about biological evolution, maybe this would push towards a more natural selection in AI, because now, especially if there is a widespread if these kind of frameworks and Internet of Agents are more popular, then even the fitness function of models that we have right now that would usually just include accuracy or even efficiency would have more parameters to take into consideration, like the ability to collaborate effectively with other agents or the completion rates of these agents. And so in that sense, then only all the agents that are being produced will be optimized to work in such environments and to be more efficient. And so only the most efficient kind of agents would be able to survive and would be used more in a way. And similarly, I mean, if we gave the ability to agents to autonomously work together, etc., maybe there will be a kind of also mimetic evolution in the sense that there will be some kind of co-working strategies that would be just created for certain tasks that we usually would not be already adopting. And so in that sense, of course, it's more potential, but also it brings with it a lot more concerns, because when you open this Pandora kind of box, then yeah, the potential is unlimited, but so are the vulnerabilities that are created with it.
Great points. As we're coming close to the end of the hour, I just want to say there's a lot of rich tangential terrain we've been covering that relates a little bit to the paper. I'm curious if there's any topics that are kind of surfacing for people from this that might inform the next theme that we try to explore in a paper. Certainly some of these pieces for me around the economic factors and how those can lead to unethical either production or use of some of the systems is interesting. Some of the multimodal pieces that we've been talking about also as well, and risk versus value of some of the agents. What are some of the other topics that people might be interested in exploring in our next time round?
Oh, for me, I think fine-tuning for agent interactions is a topic that I'm under-educated about, but I've been kind of like waiting to read some meaningful paper on this.
Speaking on the topic of like this fine-tuning for agent interaction, I think it eventually it will be like a dead-end field, because for any multi-agent system that like does all of this weird interaction, At the end of the day, you start counting how much electricity it costs to do all of those interactions. And then you will have people who will just simply like optimizing for, hey, if you do this repetitive task through this multi-agent framework, then you will probably start kind of creating this trust. Oh, this agent or this framework that I'm like delegating this specific subtask is good. How they're doing it. And eventually, underneath any agent, there'll be probably OpenAI endpoint or like OpenAI API server compatible endpoint that you kind of like, hey, I just want to remove this like service that provides to me. Let me just give access to that endpoint with that specific fine-tuned model for those specific tasks. At the end of the day, everybody will just create their own frameworks. Kind of like our economy behaves, we have a bunch of corporations that interact as internet of corporations, right? And then you're kind of like, hey, I want this widget to produce my widget, so I have a supplier. But at the end of the day, every corporation try to have vertical integration and just kind of like, hey, how I can get that trade secret of that other corporation? And in case of agents, you just create what open API client like they use, I mean, like endpoint for their client are they using? Is it provided by OpenAI or is it hosted on Microsoft Azure or is it Olama endpoint that the guys were forced to add compatibility layer with OpenAI clients or TGI from Hugging Face that also eventually added like layer of compatibility with OpenAI clients. And at the end of the day, there will be like this uniform like what's called like interface between agents, which will be just simply like low-level API endpoint that everybody will try to reverse engineer to optimize their workflows. Yeah, but again, we're like 10 years from there.
I had a comment about potential, maybe an upside potential of polyagent systems, and the idea was that there might be unexpected benefits from putting together combinations of agents that you wouldn't ordinarily expect to be put together. And the analogy in the human world would be the MIT Media Lab. And so it would seem to me that, I could imagine, I could imagine a hypervisor for the polyagent that's kind of a supervisor, and he looks at the different characteristics of the people that could, or of the agents that could be put together to collaborate on a problem, and maybe chooses an unexpected combination of polyagents. And he says, go ahead and try to solve this problem. And then they come up with an unusual solution. And maybe that solution is a hallucination, but then maybe it's a solution that no one else envisioned, that's really unique, that's really great. And so it could be like instead of being a commercial entity that's focusing on doing a very specific task to replace humans, so that a business could say, I'll hire the polyagent and he can do this task better than my employees. It could instead be a kind of exploratory space where the polyagents can put together different combinations of agents and come up with unique solutions.
No, that's a really interesting idea. And especially, I mean, addition from LLM, anything that essentially makes it veer through problem space in unexpected directions, where you have some efficacy to that, but a little bit of randomness. I'm thinking like it would be interesting to try, you make your little multi-agent team with their own Slack, and they just like throw a Liza or something on there that is like a very simple thing, but that's going to take it further afield in different directions than it usually would go. It would be interesting to see what the results of something like that would be. Siddhartha, please, why don't you close us off?
No, I mean, I just posted a link in Nature, like they created this AI scientist which could read papers and do its own peer review and so on. I mean, basic stuff. But the idea is interesting because one of the things that really hampers science is collaboration, like especially across countries, between even groups within the same university. You have people literally fighting with each other. But if, and that does, is a disservice to science. I mean, everybody's trying to get ahead, understandably. But if this sort of, a polyagent researcher can actually advance science by, going cutting across these boundaries and even resources, sort of, people who have less resources in other countries. It's a thought.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks everyone for a really rich conversation today. We'll post the video from this into the Google Doc itself. I'll put into our announcement area fine-tuning for agent interactions as one promising topic. And then if other topics kind of surface for people, we can discuss them. And then next week around this time, we can make our selection of which paper we want to read next time around. So thanks everybody for jumping in, and we'll talk with you soon.
And hey guys, I just wanted to throw in a quick note. I do notice that Alan, Randall, I think you guys are still not, and even Osama, I think you're not in our Slack, and would love to have you there. So if you haven't yet, just go on our website, polyagent.co, and just click join community, and we'll get you onboarded. Because these conversations work great. I would love to have some more asynchronous interactions too.
Great. Thanks so much, Roger.
Will do.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.